Welcome to Profiteers versus the People, the show where we punch up and dispel myths surrounding modern great people.
For the uninitiated, we take the very rich, particularly those with a media presence like Elon Musk, Bill Gates, the Mowbrays, and we put them through our PR torture test and see if they come out on crutches. Our PR torture test, acronym.
C stands for consumer harm, R for rich parents, U for union suppression and employee abuse, T for tax avoidance or tax dependency, the second C for child labor allegations, the H for harassment allegations, the E for egregious behavior after hours, and the S for slap suits and journalist suppression. I'm Money Mike.
I am Rad Bill. There were like an episode or two ago, I was like, it's okay, Money Mike. I can do the crutches this time.
And then you fucked it up.
I couldn't, yeah.
And I felt so much better because I feel like every time we have to edit that because I fuck up something. In our script, we don't write out what the crutches stand for because we assume that by now one of us will remember. And I get anxiety every time when I'm like, oh, fuck, what does that stand for?
That part is just a pop quiz from Money Mike for each release.
And do I fail sometimes?
Oh, God. With that, I am Rad Bill. And... So, a source for this series was the book Billion Dollar Fantasy by Albert Chen, who has another book that I'm not going to read because Billion Dollar Fantasy is unequivocally pro-gambling. And as far as I can tell, everything Albert Chen writes is like, gambling rocks. I'm a writer with Sports Illustrated.
Interesting.
Yeah. So... we're going to talk about a lot of what they talk about in this book. And there's going to be some, like, I've got a few vibe checks baked in, Money Mike, where I'm going to, like, he goes in and he, like, breaks down a character. And we're going to do a thing where I'm going to have you read a few quotes here and there from the book. And I'm going to ask you just gut check on how you feel about the character.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah, like, I feel like this is a heroin addict writing a book about how great heroin is.
I think that's definitely what it is. And his key defense, by the way, is basically some people are really good at heroin and some people are just victims of heroin. Steal the book if you've got to read it. We'll tell you the really interesting things about it right here in this series about this book and about the people that the book discusses. First, this is a big development from this book. I think I know where the $400 billion figure comes from now. It's not on the internet, and I assumed it was just pulled out of some lobbyist's ass. But the fact that it has a potential origin, in my mind, makes it dumber than if the number did come out of someone's ass.
When was this book written, do you know?
I believe 2019.
Okay, so fairly recently.
Fairly recently. Yep, it was post gambling is legal now, basically, in the US.
Interesting. And for those who are for some reason starting on the second episode in our series, the $400 billion figure was talked a lot about in our first episode.
Yes.
I'm not going to tell you what the significance is because you should just go listen to it. Why are you here?
Why are you doing this? Don't jump around. Like, we want to have fun here, and that's, you're starting in the middle of the race, and that's less fun. So, in the prologue of Billion Dollar Fantasy, they tell the story of a group of 3 men in Las Vegas who anticipated a large-scale adoption of sports betting in the U.S. While discussing this, one of the men, a former dentist and highly respected bookmaker by trade, named Vic Salerno, is quoted as suggesting that because the handle in Las Vegas around this time, early 90s, was just under $1 billion, and the state population was under 1 million, if you scale the activity to the entire U.S., conservatively, the value of these lines would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 billion. The book acknowledges that this sounds outrageous and then follows it up by asserting that some people who aren't named estimated that sports betting could be $1 trillion business.
So he was like, so some people think that this is a $300 billion business, and they're idiots because of their dumb math. It's actually $1 trillion business. Refuses to elaborate.
This could literally generate more money than our entire nation's debt, because this is the early 90s and it was way less back then. That's what we're talking about here. Regardless of whether or not this is where the $80 to $380 billion figure comes from, which would be disturbingly stupid, the math puts us in this range anyways. What this means is that the figure that made it into legislation was potentially ignoring the existence of a Las Vegas airport and interstates. This ignores that Las Vegas is a gambling destination.
Yeah, that's a big one. Like people go to Las Vegas to gamble.
It's a good thing the book mentioned that this Vic Salerno guy was a dentist. Because he's going, okay, there's 1 million people in Vegas. That's where all the money in Vegas comes from.
Yeah.
We're just glazing over that logical jump there. Holy shit.
I want to know what toothpaste Vic recommends so I can fucking avoid it.
Yeah, I'm not touching that shit.
If he's a Colgate man, I'm out.
The book also quotes another observation by Vic, which is, okay, the money that this is keeping out of the tax system and the money that is going into the underground, the black market. Because, Vic, he knows 3 bookkeepers in a Wisconsin town of 1,000 people.
Bear in mind, that's over $1 million in untaxed commerce in that one small town between those 3 black market bookies.
This guy talked to Congress, didn't he?
Oof. Yeah, we let him help make rules.
Yeah. Second, because the book is pro-sports betting, by necessity, it has to create a dichotomy between gambling and games of skill. Now, some of you at home might be going, well, fantasy is a game of skill, and fine. Those aren't mutually exclusive. The book continually describes internet poker in the same light as a game of skill, and thus not gambling. And it never explicitly says, and thus not gambling. It just says, we hear the legislators saying, well, that's gambling, but it's a game of skill. And what they're doing there is creating that dichotomy. It's so that people can say, right, it's a game of skill. There's the narrative. Daily fantasy sports, specifically, is what we're talking about here. Like poker and blackjack, is a game of skill. And thus, ... you fill in the blanks, not gambling, is what they're after here.
And it's a totally false dichotomy.
Yeah.
Because poker is a game of skill, and poker is also gambling.
Yes. Now, what are the implications of this treatment? Well, there are a handful of people who have the tact to make money at internet poker and daily fantasy sports. The sharks, as the book describes them. Then there is everyone else who might think they're sharks, but in reality, they're minnows. And these minnows are viewed as collateral damage, basically. Necessary for the circle of life. That's the big thing with the sharks, is the sharks need minnows to survive. They need people to consume, more or less. When they finally perish, the sharks that is, they become the sediment that grows what the minnows require for survival, which in the case of gambling is hope. basically. Now, when legislation is mentioned following a scandal, and there are a lot of scandals with this industry, and we'll get into all those, the author describes the legislation as, and this is for real, quote unquote, threatening the livelihoods of thousands. Now, when these companies are called in front of New York State Senate, most politicians present are described as being incompetent, which the quotes tell the story. They are incompetent. One of them says, shouldn't there be a committee assembled to regulate sports betting? And that's literally what that committee was, which is case in point. Like, some of these people are not paying attention. They're spending all day on Twitter or whatever. However, there were people there who had done the research. Eric Schneiderman was an opponent of sports betting, and he was competent. When it was his turn to speak, he asked the following. Okay, hey, sports betting companies, daily fantasy sports isn't gambling, yet for this exact business, you hold a gambling license in England. Can you explain? How does Nigel Eccles, a founder of Fanduel, respond? No idea. The book acknowledges this question and then shifts immediately to judging Eric Schneiderman's character and what his motives might be for asking these questions. Who might be the lobbyists behind Eric Schneiderman? Anyway, let's get into the weeds here. Our daily fantasy sports story begins in November of 2007 in Britain, in the throes of the Great Recession. And this timing is deceptively favorable to these sorts of enterprises. People are grinding down the cogs of our society and getting rich, meaning the output of these devices on which the rest of us rely diminishes. The actions leading to the crisis of '08 ground the old cogs of prosperity to smooth, useless wheels. They weren't serviced, and the actions that led to their destruction weren't addressed, which set the stage for the next wave of entrepreneurs to get to work grinding down the cogs in the exact same way. They just had to find new cogs to grind down, i.e., the next means of exploiting or exploitation amidst the rubble of the old guard.
Everyone is poor, scared, and desperate. There's got to be a business in there somewhere. Enter crypto, enter Groupon, enter Airbnb, enter Uber, and last but not least, enter gambling as an economic force.
So we just spent a lot of time saying pretty explicitly that while it might be a game of skill, daily fantasy sports is gambling, which is a decisive position. But give us some rope here.
Chapter 1. Daily fantasy sports is gambling.
So Nigel Eccles, the founder of Fanduel, claims to have always had an entrepreneurial itch. And though he... I know. Buckle up. Though he attributes his deference to gambling startups to his graduate degree in math, where he first gained an appreciation for setting odds, we can also find a reasonable basis for this inclination in his work history. After a few years at McKinsey, surprise, surprise, Nigel transitioned to Flutter.com, a Silicon Valley-based betting organization which professed to being a betting organization. The eBay of sports betting is what they were going with, specifically. Now, conveniently for Nigel, this new position didn't require a move to the US from the UK, where he resided already, because besides its headquarters, Flutter had absolutely no presence in the US at all. It couldn't procure customers or really operate in the US because it was a sports betting organization, and sports betting was illegal in the US. One can surmise proximity to VC dollars is enough to justify an HQ in the Bay Area, but because the UK would be a major market for the company, Nigel's being based there was probably only positive. We can't operate in the US at all. Nigel's out here so we can design a product that actually works for the UK, where we can go about making money. So here's our first beat. Nigel gets work at a US-based company with almost no presence in the US, but a major presence in the UK. Nigel was employee number 85 at Flutter and helped with product design. It was here that he got a first-hand glimpse at how a gambling startup scales. And if he had his wits about him, probably sorted that scaling a gambling company is a fucking nightmare. Flutter.com spent years struggling before eventually merging with their main competitor, Betflare, as a means of survival. Nigel remained at the company, now called Betflare, post-merger, and eventually the company would take on the title Flutter Entertainment. More on that later. Now, his next career change was driven by he and his wife Leslie's desire to move to Edinburgh. They hoped to raise their family there, and Johnston Press had an opening, so Nigel left. According to the lore, in 2007, Leslie noticed when they were already in Edinburgh, they already had a mortgage that they were paying, that her husband was miserable and encouraged him to leave his job and start something. Unsurprisingly, given Nigel's background, it was a betting platform. Quite surprisingly, the upstart had absolutely nothing to do with sports. You see, Nigel Eccles didn't really give a shit about sports.
Yeah, see, this, I think, is pretty typical to how a business is born. There's not an aha moment. There's not a light bulb over your head. You troubleshoot, you waste money, you get to work failing dismally.
I mean, that's the whole thing.
And probably ruin some relationships with the people that you love. It wasn't Fanduel right away. For Nigel Eccles, Leslie Eccles, and their three other partners, all fairly well educated, they had to blow some serious money on this dipshit idea first, where players use play money, which they presumably have to buy, to bet on the outcome of current events.
You're betting on the news.
Who would want to do that?
I know.
Who?
God. I know.
2007, we really might be in the fucking end times, big dog.
How could you come out of 2000, the Great Recession, and go, okay, what about instead of playing the stock market, where in a way you're sort of betting on, like, you know, what's in tomorrow's headlines if you're a day trader? Yeah. What if you're literally betting on tomorrow's headlines?
Jesus, it was Kalshi before Kalshi.
Yes.
But what I love is in 2007, they were like, fuck you.
Yeah, it couldn't take off.
Yeah, which, good. Fucking good. If I have to see another goddamn Kalshi advertisement before I watch a YouTube video because I refuse to pay for fucking YouTube Premium, I'm gonna have a fucking stroke.
Yeah, dude. I'm gonna crash out, as the youth say.
This startup was named HubDub.
HubDub. Very indicative of what you actually did.
Maybe that's actually why it failed, because they named it HubDub. That sounds like a fucking a British dessert. It's like, oh, Mama's gonna make some HubDub, and it's fucking beans, 3 sausages on a waffle.
Yeah, and this is kind of funny to the Kalshi side, because like Nigel is basically quoted here and there being like, "That was a stupid idea." This was fucking dumb. We were directionless.
It wouldn't have been dumb if you didn't name it HubDub, big dog. Like, you gotta be better.
It wouldn't be as dumb. And the HubDub name, like, one of Nigel's babies was babbling. And HubDub sounded like the babbling. And they were like, fuck it, we'll call it that. And, like, you're not getting a user base that way.
Oh, yeah.
So here are FanDuel's roots, by the way. This is the framework. It's a legacy company to HubDub. A pivot from HubDub with the same basic framework. Its entire genealogy is rooted in gambling. So how does Nigel feel about the distinction? The assertion we're making here that, yeah, man, the framework here is gambling. Most of what you have here is gambling, game of skill or not. I don't know that he disagrees or ever disagreed. In the 2010s, no. When Nigel would be pressed on the question of whether or not FanDuel was sports betting, because everyone interviewing him was sort of playing to that same lobbyist-driven narrative, his answer was always to the question of whether or not they would be allowed to survive, not to whether or not theirs was a sports betting company. His responses usually sounded something like this. So are you a sports betting company?
Let me see if I can do an English accent. Well,
No.
I'm hoping. Oh, that's not good. Well, I'm hoping that we can get state legislators over to our side for all this. We're doing everything in our power to change their minds. What this answer means is effectively, whatever we are, I'm hoping that we can be excused from the rule of law, which I think just speaks brilliantly to the current state of American politics.
Yeah.
Daily fantasy sports was called a Trojan horse for sports betting and legalized gambling at large for years. But this designation is ridiculous. Even if it isn't technically gambling, it's addictive the same way gambling is addictive. And it's destructive in the same way gambling is destructive. Aren't those the reasons that we made gambling illegal? It was ruining people's lives. Dude, have you ever gone on like Wall Street Bets and seen someone losing like their whole livelihood because they're clearly addicted to gambling and they're doing it in the stock market? Have you ever read a Reddit post of somebody who's like married to someone who's addicted to gambling? I know people who have suffered from many, many, many addictions, and they are bad. Drugs, alcohol, whatever. But, dude, gambling is pernicious.
It is.
I'm talking people hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, and the only way that they see out is by betting more.
And that's my thing, too, is with the Trojan horse argument, what you're sort of giving away is that, like, well, this is sort of, it's only partially gambling, and it's gambling, man. It's a game of skill, but it's still fucking gambling.
Yeah, it has all of the downsides.
It has all the downsides.
That's what it is.
It works the way the gambling industry works, which is why the gambling industry was made fucking illegal, or as far as this book is concerned, driven underground. It's because there was an environment full of sharks just stalking prey.
I feel like as we had this discussion, in the same sense, we're not like gambling should be eradicated and illegal. It might be, gambling.
I don't think the gambling industry should be able to stalk people through their phones.
That is a tip of a big fucking iceberg.
Daily fantasy sports is a Trojan horse. If the Trojan horse in question was shaped like a literal soldier transport with the words smallpox blankets written on the side. And if you wheel that beyond your city walls, you are a danger to your city. You don't get to look back and say that you were tricked when, oh man, it was full of soldiers? That's a problem. You knew it was going to be bad.
Exactly.
You let it happen anyways. In fact, it couldn't have happened without you. Anyone in their right mind knows that sports betting is gambling. But when Nigel is asked if he thinks his product is sports betting, the answer he gives is to a different question, which is, are they going to let you ignore the law? If it isn't gambling, what the hell is gambling at all? Whatever, what is it? Is it literally whatever comes out and says, I'm fucking gambling? If opiates are tightly regulated, why is it that I can buy a near lethal dose of 7-OH while I'm buying gas? What is an opiate if 7-OH isn't? Anything that is literally named opiate? Synthetic weed, which I like. Let's be real. It's weed. We can buy it and say, hey, this isn't technically weed. But, that could be the name of the product, not technically weed. It's there because your state didn't legalize weed. And this is all it takes to bypass the law. Centuries from now, whatever comes after us is going to gaze upon the millions upon millions of pages of completely meaningless legislation and wonder, A, what the hell our government did all day and why the shit these people were allowed to collect paychecks, and B, how on earth a civilization governed this way could ever survive. And we know the answer to that one. It doesn't. Not really. We're not like this. We are cows lined up for the slaughter here.
Oh. Well, that's...
Sorry. Yeah.
No, you're fine. So, okay. In summation, meaningfully, we say all this to say, daily fantasy sports is just fucking sports betting.
Yeah.
And it's gambling. And if you disagree with that and have any argument beyond rough definitions of words and pretend dichotomies, let me know in the comments. Let us know in the comment section to help us understand how something that is a game of skill cannot be gambling. Because, boy howdy.
Because if there was any sort of poker game that was truly and solely a game of skill and not gambling, casinos would not touch it. To sort of put a bow on this shit, is this quote-unquote technically quote-unquote gambling? Anyone who feigns caring about this question at a podium is not doing so in good faith. And yet this technicality is what buoyed the industry's rise in the US.
Chapter 2. Daily fantasy sports as a cottage industry.
In June 2009, after raising around $1 million from British investors for their hub-dub concept, yes, really, the team realized that this quote-unquote bet on current events model of theirs wasn't going to make the kind of money it would require for survival, which has to be nuts after people give you $1 million for it. Hey, actually, this is like a dumb fucking idea. Sorry, guys. No, I guess we're sorry too. I guess. Like,
imagine being one of those investors. You're like, you give someone $1 million, and they're like, "Hey, so we're gonna give you your $1 million back."
Yeah.
Or sorry, you know,
this is a dumb idea. Do we just give it back?
Yeah, I think you're sitting there like, God damn, dude, I invested in the idea where the person who pitched me the idea is telling me it's dumb. I should reconsider all of my decisions.
Right. So when he's interviewed alone, Nigel passively takes credit for conceiving their next pivot. And like, I don't mean he's like, oh, it was me, I did this. But he'll do this sort of like, well, you know, the idea came to me when X, Y, and Z, bum, bum, bum. When he's interviewed with Leslie Eccles, who happens to be his wife and his business partner, he claims the team got it from a fan of their hub-dub platform at a conference in Dallas. And the latter version of this story is the one I'm more inclined to believe. You see, although the pair are married, I get the sense that Leslie would interject to correct Nigel here regardless of whether or not he was on mic. I think this because Leslie Eccles is a fucking ball buster, and in the years following their pivot, she's going to be running marketing, which for a company like this means she is the company. More on this later. Nigel doesn't get to be the visionary if the only reason you've ever heard of Fanduel is because of his wife. Also, Leslie is a woman in a corporate leadership role, and whether you're beaten into shape for this sort of position or born for it, crashing through the glass ceiling means you are not someone to be fucked with. You are hard-headed enough to break through the glass ceiling. The author of Billion Dollar Fantasy is a writer for Sports Illustrated named Albert Chen. I mentioned that earlier. What this means is that his refrain for describing Leslie is fairly predictable. He heaps on praise and explains the following more or less like it's only a good thing.
She's super competitive.
Like, okay. And I have friends who are competitive, but if any of my other friends lead in by describing them as competitive, it's like this other person
kind of an asshole.
Be friends with them. Yeah. You basically said he's my friend, but he's an asshole.
Yeah, I like him in spite of who he is.
Yeah, and this is like my favorite little secret about this story is despite Chen's intentions, there's sort of no way to hide the fact that almost everyone involved is a cringeworthy asshole in one way or another. Chen seeks to flesh out Leslie's character by taking a look at her life outside of the office. And for me, at least, it didn't have the desired effect. I heard the competitive thing, and then here it is. After she and Nigel moved to Edinburgh, She's invited by a friend to attend a weekly scrapbooking club comprised of a fairly tight-knit group of moms in the area. Great way to meet folks. Each week, Leslie attends, and each week, her demeanor remains the same. Calculated, intense, preoccupied, great at parties. Eventually, though, a contest is announced, and at this news, Leslie roars to life. The prize? Art supplies.
Oh, God.
Now, Leslie doesn't have time for art, and she isn't particularly creative, but she has kids, and kids do art. So, each week, a new 30-minute scrapbooking contest is announced where the moms all try to make a page adherent to a specific theme, and I assume the prizes each week are about the same. Each week, Leslie wins it with quiet intensity. She is focused, lurking in the tall grass, scissors in hand, waiting for her prey. It's felt tip pens this week. Eventually, something comes up, and the moms who host these little parties announce that the parties, they're coming to an end. It's too bad, you know? Later, though, Leslie's friend who invited her to this group gets a call from that same group, and as it turns out, those are starting back up again. But this time, plus ones aren't going to be allowed.
Oh, God. God. Poor Leslie.
That hurts.
Leslie.
It hurts.
Yeah, that hurts.
She scrapbooked too hard.
Yeah. God, that is so unfortunate.
I know. So her behavior here is justified in the book by her and Nigel being strapped for cash. In her mind, this was supposedly the only way she could get these supplies for her kids. Is this true? We do not know. Leslie is fond enough of how she's portrayed in this book to plug this book in interviews that are in our sources. But alas, this and another book, again by Albert Chen, are the only books we've found that dive deep into these companies, into this family specifically. Further, Nigel and Leslie's early life seems to be completely scrubbed from the internet. We have little indicators that are enough to drive a person mad. Both parties have annoying start-from-nothing stories. In fact, to hear Albert Chen tell it, the entire founding team behind HubDub and Fanduel have humble roots. Nigel grew up milking cows. Leslie's parents ran a small inn, and so on. However, Nigel went on to get his postgrad at Oxford, and after graduation, he got a job at McKinsey. Like, do you feel that? That rich kid shit? That actually his family's farm was 6,000 acres and the family has a helicopter type vibe? It's in there. In fact, the Eccles name is all over the part of Ireland where he was born. Tyrone, Ireland. And though there are farming organizations and estates with Eccles in the name, all over the UK. We just don't have enough to tie any of them to Nigel.
We can't give them that rich parents. Maybe the founders really did come from not much, and maybe they are challenging the whole core thesis of the show that basically billionaires don't come from nothing. But we've got a story to tell, so hang tight.
Yep. Yeah, we get to revisit this. Now, the technicality on which Fanduel is hanging their fate in the U.S. is not some closely held secret. People were watching and almost certainly lobbied for the passing of the Unlawful Internet Gambling Enforcement Act, and this was at the core of the technicality argument. When the act became law in 2006, however, it wouldn't be the companies with influence that garnered controlling market share. NBC's Snapdraft was ready for launch years before Fanduel hit the scene, but NBC, which owned Snapdraft, refused to let the site go public because they knew it was illegal, and they knew that regulators would take notice right away.
And so they had more to lose.
They have something to lose here. And by the way, NBC was probably right. Was there an argument they could make? Maybe. But when you're a public company, corporate lawyers have to make that argument for you, and that shit ain't cheap.
Yeah. Yeah. So as a result, the field was largely cleared for little guys with no morals.
Yeah.
Low volume, small prizes, unproven executives, all the better.
Yeah, fuck it. No one's looking. People talk all the time about the tight founding years, but 4 years in, so like 2013, Fanduel had 60% market share, and their fee income was just $12 million. 60% of the market. Their first funding round raised just $1 million, and their second one was $4 million. This is money, don't get me wrong, but it's not startup money.
Much. Yeah, not in this world, not much.
Yeah.
Really not much.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. They had the shoestring budget, typical of a startup for those first couple years, but that isn't what I see here. I just see a fringe industry.
Yeah.
On that, I'd pose that at this point, the industry just wasn't big enough to warrant any enforcement action of FBI raids. No one gave a shit. If NBC, one of the big players, gets in, they have the wherewithal to make it big. The way that FanDuel made it for those 4 years was because no one's kicking the door down for a few million fucking dollars. It's just not that big of an industry.
Exactly. But, it's not that big of an industry. No one's kicking the door down. But as we see, not a lot of people are willing to take the risk to invest in it. Yep. It's kind of like when, the whole cannabis legalization thing started. Everyone was like, there's money in it, there's money in it, there's money in it. But most of the big money players were like, until the legality gets sorted out, we're not touching this shit. It actually resulted in a bunch of sanctions and annoying shit. But remember, Radbill said that FanDuel had 60% of the market. So 40% in 2010 was pretty much up for grabs.
Yep.
Enter the New York City startup, Draft Street.
Now, where FanDuel had 5 founders, Draft Street had just 3. Chen attributes the idea for the Draft Street site to Mark Nierenberg as a means of starting the book, and does his best to paint Mark as a sort of bad boy founder. And Money, I kind of want you to read a few of these and see how you feel about it.
Okay.
This is Albert Chen telling us about Mark Nierenberg.
I feel like I need some 40s gangster jazz in the background.
Yeah. Like that.
By the time Mark was a rebellious 8th grader who'd been suspended from school more times than he could remember, he was mobilizing his buddies to join his own version of the old school season-long fantasy football games their dads played. Mark's wiring was complete in college during those hours spent hunched over a laptop in his frat house couch. Mark's wiring was complete in college during those hours spent hunched over a laptop on his frat house couch, jazzing a second or third Red Bull and a cigarette and the line into Party Poker Live. He had turned hours of repetitive labor into more pocket money than a student in a sleepy college town knew what to do with, winning 5 figures in one night and somehow blowing it all during a 1-week bender in Atlantic City.
So, all right, 2 things with that. That's hard to read, right? And not the content is a bummer. It's just the structure of how this motherfucker writes hurts, right?
Yeah, dude, if you ever see me jazzing a Red Bull, punch me in the face. I don't know what that means, but it sounds like the wrong way to drink a Red Bull.
Yeah, listeners at home, don't fucking jazz Red Bulls, okay?
Yeah, dude, what the fuck?
Leave your Red Bulls unjazzed. They're for drinking.
Yeah. Mark sounds like a fucking degen.
Sounds awful, right?
Yeah, he sounds like he got really lucky at Party Poker Live and then lost it all in Atlantic City because that's what happens when you gamble.
So here's my take, because I have a take specifically on the Atlantic City thing. Firstly, so this guy is all over just about any college campus.
Oh,
Do you remember him?
Oh, I've met 17 of this guy. And they were all unbearable.
Yeah, there's one on every frat house couch. And despite all those winnings they never shut up about, they never offer to pay for shit.
Yeah, they are never buying weed.
They're never buying weed.
Somehow they're always smoking somebody else's.
They're always in the fucking room when I'm bending that soda can and poking holes in it.
Oh, that hit close to home.
Now, what I think happened here is that Albert Chen interviewed this guy and just wrote down everything he said without question. Mark's dad was a doctor, so I'm going to offer a theory on what was really going on that front. I'm going to pose that Mark's dad, because here's what's really going on with the kid on the frat house couch. Mark's dad gave him a credit card and he used to play online poker. He won money about as much as he lost money, but doesn't get invited to stuff, so he needs to make up poker stories to be cool. Whenever his frat buddies do invite him out, they convince him to buy the alcohol. And while in line for the register, they entertain his ranting about how killer his winnings were and how he was a shark in an ocean of minnows. And by the way, this is where that part mentioned first on like page 3 of this book.
Mark actually called himself a shark in an ocean of minnows.
Yeah, there's this whole thing where it's like, Mark's see, there are 2 ways that you can look at the world as far as Mark's concerned. The other one, and then the one where there are sharks and there are minnows. It's brutal. Yeah.
You know, I don't know how I feel about the death penalty.
But just like that piece crammed between all those fucking run-on sentences, the words just kept running together. Just, school suspension, online poker, sharks and minnows.
Yeah. Oh, that is rough. That is rough.
It's hard, right? So as for Atlantic City, he supposedly won 5 figures and then went to Atlantic City and lost every penny, which means there's no way for him to demonstrate these winnings should someone ask for proof. He doesn't have to point to any large purchase either, because if I was a college kid and I suddenly had $9,080, which if he actually won it, that's what's happening here, and after telling the story enough, he rounded it up to 10. I'm buying a jet ski off Facebook Marketplace. Or something shitheaded like that, right? Like it's tonight money. Alas, he doesn't have to point to anything because he lost it all in Atlantic City immediately afterwards. So, money's there, then it's gone. No one can see it. In reality, I'm willing to bet his dad took him to Atlantic City, and he made up the story of the winnings after the fact. Another cool story. That's my little pet theory.
Yeah, honestly, his dad being a doctor and
a huge gambler, by the way.
Oh,
dad bets a lot. Yep.
Well, he was a doctor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, interesting. Yeah, because I was gonna say like, it's kind of like how in Breaking Bad, Walt like makes up the gambling story to explain how rich he was. I wonder if maybe Mark was just like self-conscious that he had his dad's credit card and wanted people to think he was cool, so he made up a gambling story. But really, there was no Atlantic City. There was no online poker.
Yeah.
It was just a sad boy alone in his room.
Yeah, he's not playing online poker on that frat house couch. He's just watching porn.
Yeah, exactly.
So, in 2007, supposedly, and this is legit how this book reads, in 2007, after a few too many rounds at a local bar, a stranger showed Mark their fantasy lineup. The one thing. And showing you, I'm not even going to try and do the book thing. So, the way the book tells it, it's a brutal read. In 2007, supposedly after a few too many rounds at a local bar, a stranger shows Mark their fantasy lineup. He thought, this is Mark, that the lineup sucked apparently, but there was no way he could exploit this stranger in their shitty lineup. And this is genuinely how this interaction is described and how Mark's view of this random person is described. There was no way for the shark to get the minnow. Ugh. So Mark, now drunk, as the book goes to great pains to emphasize, goes home and drunkenly emails a few friends of his. Here is the supposed email, word for word, and I'm going to highlight this, and I want you to read it, actually. Here we go.
I want to create an online fantasy sports website where customers can deposit and withdraw funds, participate in live drafts and auctions with people they've never met all over the world, chat with other participants, know that their money and personal information is 100% secured. If this site was up and running the way that I envision it, there would be so much traffic. It's ridiculous. $, $.
I just can't believe the author included the $signs in this. Who does he think is reading this book?
But say, if that's how coherent Mark's drunk texts are, maybe billionaires are actually better than the rest of us.
So this is telling. Mark's the vision guy. He does not become the CEO of his own brainchild.
Maybe it was the drinking and the gambling.
That might have been it. Yeah. Oh, did I tell you about the last time I had a ton of money? It's all gone. Don't ask me where it went. Just say Atlantic City, and they're like, maybe Brian should leave this thing.
Mark, that's called embezzling.
And this speaks to the whole frat boy thing. So apparently there's one opinion he values more than anyone else's, and that was his dad's, who he supposedly didn't hit up for any money, supposedly, for this venture, but who he did approach for proof of concept. His dad had tried something like this in the 90s. In fact, the book half credits Lex Nierenberg, Mark's dad, with inventing fantasy football. Though
so many people have invented this.
Dude, yeah, it's like fishing stories. And though Lex loved his son's idea, his attempt at monetizing this thing in the 90s led him to believe that it was surely illegal, because when he tried it in the 90s, everyone told him it was illegal. However, legality was of no concern to Brian Schwartz, who was introduced to Mark through friends, and before long, the two have an office space on Union Square, which is described as a loft turned frat house with NBA posters on the walls, a fridge full of beers, and in the middle of the room, a custom beer pong table.
Oh, how old is Mark at this time?
He is out of college.
Oof.
In the pitch deck the two men put together, this enterprise is described as its own invention. They came to the conclusion that the game should be shorter form because the full season games typically lost people's interest if they went out of the money. Thus, daily and weekly games would be more successful, they theorized. To their credit, the games on Draft Street were widely considered to be better games. As such, everyone began copying them before too long, and it was here that the founders first made contact with the company that would soon be leading the market. Draft Street sent a cease and desist to the founders of Fanduel. The heat was on.
Chapter 3. The fucking ads.
Now, Draft Street's advertising efforts get mentioned first in Billion Dollar Fantasy. The founders were both readers of Barstool Sports, so they chose the site for the first ad. But they did something sneaky here. Instead of the run-of-the-mill, like, hey, come to Draft Street, the illegal sports betting website, they published an ad disguised as an article, which told the story of the site's first big winner in the form of a first-hand account. They had the winner, a student from Elon University, write 500 words on his experience winning the grand prize, $60,000, with a few tournament entries that were each under $100. They titled the article, "Does turning $60 into $9,000 on Draft Street get this dude laid?" Which, of course, it's brutal, right? However, 2 hours after the article hit Barstool, Draft Street had added 3,000 new users. It's like dog food, where people are like, dogs love this food, even though it like tastes like shit to you when you try it, and you just have to be like, well, they just have different taste. Anyways, 2 hours after the article hit Barstool, Draft Street had added 3,000 new users. Apparently, this was some really good fucking dog food. And Brian had an epiphany. Even though their games were pretty good, the quality of the games didn't matter. The site's usability didn't matter. All that mattered was marketing. The games don't even have to be that good. As we mentioned in the last episode, you basically just need a handful of people to get addicted to your product and you're good to go. Though the customer lifetime value, LTV, you'll probably hear us using that term in the next episode, forecasted by the Draft Street team was only $200, remember the stats that we described last time. 60% of the revenue generated by a company like this comes from the crowd that meets the thresholds of addiction. Best way to get addicts out of a virginal market is just exposure. Share stories of regular people striking gold and open a fucking shovel store. This epiphany would inform the trajectory of the industry by and large. Though it would take Fanduel a bit longer to reach this conclusion, by 2012, there is perceptibly no catching the two leaders. That's Draft Street and Fanduel. This is surprising because moving past the offering of each company, the respective operations were surprisingly tame. A primary goal of Fanduel was to break even or post a modest profit each month. Draft Street was more bold in their spending, but by 2012, they were profitable. Unheard of for your run-of-the-mill tech startup. I think, by and large, Amazon still isn't profitable if you zero out AWS. The operation that your run-of-the-mill consumer is aware of Amazon's is losing money, as I understand it, to this day. However, Draft Street at this point saw the writing on the wall. The company successfully raised $2 million, a massive boon for their advertising budget, and then Fanduel followed that act by raising $12 million. The game was changing. So when IAC, we'll talk about them more in the next episode, came through and made an offer for a controlling stake in Draft Street, Brian, Mark, and the other two founders who don't appear to be mentioned at all in our sources, took the deal. And it is with our next episode that we'll explore the shift they saw in their surroundings. Thank you all so much for listening. Join us for the next one where we do the part where these companies become all anyone sees on TV anymore. Did you enjoy the episode? Consider giving us a rating on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify or liking this video on YouTube or whatever. Did we do just okay? Be like, hey, you did all right. You guys, as far as podcast episodes go, this was okay. If you have a second, please consider subscribing. It apparently makes a huge difference, though I'm not exactly sure how. Anyways, tune in next time. We love you. And goodbye.